Welcome to Our Town, a 30-minute podcast brought to you by Best Bark Communications, a small but fierce client-centered marketing company powered by decades of experience and well-established business networks.
This is Andy Ockershausen, and this is Our Town, the story of our town with the people who make our story. And we are so delighted, and I mean it sincerely, Cary, that Cary Hatch, the CEO of MDB Communications, is our special podcast guest today because she's been everywhere, and we stopped her from leaving us just to get here at this date, and you did it. And we're so grateful to see you.
Delighted to be here, Andy.
Now, my wife called you the mogul, but now she's changed it to call you the maven of Washington advertising.
I'll sign up for either one. Yeah.
But you are. Cary Hatch, you are the most incredible female. And I tell you this, off camera, you know I do, and off the mic. Everywhere I go, you're there or have been there. And I am so impressed by that, Cary.
Well, I try to contribute where I can for things that matter. And I try to represent not just the best interests of my agency, but frankly, the best interests of the region.
Well, but you do it with so much enthusiasm, which means a lot. It means a lot to your clients. I know you, National Geographic, Fannie Mae, Destination DC, International Spy Museum, my favorite, DC Lottery and Sprint. But this is the record of the largest agency, I think the largest local advertising agency in the city of Washington.
Well, certainly as a woman-owned company, we've been privileged to work with some stellar brands, ones that maybe 20 or 30 years ago I never even could imagine that we'd have the opportunity to work for.
I know, but Cary, that's because you got so involved in the community and your brand is all over as Cary Hatch, not as MDB. And I go way back with it. But I want to know about Cary Hatch, not about advertising, but about the person that you are and that you were born in this city.
Yeah, I'm a native Washingtonian, which is always interesting. I mean, let's face it, wherever you go in the town, everybody takes score how many native Washingtonians are in the room. And if you can find more than two, then you're really over quota, right?
And there are four of us here in this room. But, Cary, the thing is that I have noticed that in my broadcast life and in business life, there are more Washingtonians than I ever realized. And my peer group is still alive. They're Washingtonians, and you're one of them.
Yeah, no, it's a great subset to be in. And I think for those of us that are born in Washington, D.C. and in the region in general, I think we have to be proud about that because let's face it, when you go outside this market, people are talking stuff about about Washington. So we have to stand up for our team.
And you went to school here, but also things I didn't know about you, and I'm sure people don't know, you went to a lot of schools out of Washington.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. I was born in Washington, D.C., but my dad, lucky for us, was a successful businessman with a company, started as a sales guy with a company called AM International, Addressograph Multigraph Corporation. So we started moving every 2.5 years. By the age of, 7 or 8, I could actually show our house as a real estate agent because I was so used to moving so many times. It was crazy. And, I born in Washington.
He was upwardly mobile, right?
Every 2 years he got promoted, which is generally a good thing. But as a child, when you go from Washington to California, Washington to Florida, Washington to Ohio, Washington to New York, and then back to Washington, by the time I got into high school, I said, you know what? That's enough. I'm done.
And, you put your foot down?
Well, pretty much, because at that point, I think I was a junior or senior in high school. And he said, oh, yeah, I've gotten promoted again. We're going to Chicago. And I was kind of like, yeah, I'm not. So I finished high school at Woodward High School. And thankfully, I was allowed to do that. And then went to the University of Maryland because, honestly, local school, could have gone to Ohio University, which is where my dad went to college. And my mom went to University of Maryland. And wanted to stay local because I was done with moving.
Well, thank the Lord you decided to plant your flag here as a maven. Where did you start in the advertising world?
I started during one of the more interesting recessions, 1978. When you're worried about all kinds of things, in that case, gas rationing and all kinds of insanity in those early years. But had a hard time finding a job. Started freelancing for Stackett, Sanderson & White, an old ad agency from many years ago. And they were kind enough to offer me what was a junior art director's position. And I eventually went from there to find a job in Baltimore because I couldn't find one in Washington. And I worked in Baltimore for an agency called Torrey & Myers Advertising, and worked on the Utz potato chip account and the Savings Bank of Baltimore and a bunch of accounts. But that's where I cut my teeth as an art director and realized, Andy, actually I was perfectly mediocre as an art director.
Wait a minute now, Hatch. I don't know you as an art. Nobody that I know knows you as that person. You were an art director.
Like I said,
you're in sales.
I was average, so that's why nobody knew of me.
Yeah, but you used it as a springboard.
I did.
To sales.
I did. Well, it made me recognize, as I say sometimes, that I was in the right church, the wrong pew. I love advertising. I love advocating for brands. I love working for our clients. But, I wasn't going to make it as an art director because I was very mediocre. And so I went over to account service, and had to join this firm, actually, Michael David Brown, MDB Communications. And in order to make that leap as an account executive.
I never knew what MD meant until you just said, Michael David Brown. Son of a gun.
No,
but
great
you became,
guy.
but that's a big surprise to me. I'm sure 99% of the people who know you and the myriad of boards you serve on did not know your background as an art director. I think that's fabulous because we are always talking to people, and you get all the time, how do I get in your business? And I tell them all, start at the bottom. What you do, if somebody lets you in the front door, take the job.
And it's funny that you mentioned that. I've had the privilege to be a commencement speaker at several colleges around here, and I have my 10 commandments of your own personal brand as you start in this industry. And one of the things I always say is you're not starting at the bottom, you're starting at the beginning. Give yourself permission to get a job. Doesn't mean you're going to stick with it. Hell knows. I didn't stick with mine. I mean, I was an art director and mediocre, so I switched. But you got to start somewhere. And so give yourself permission to start at the beginning, and that means taking whatever job you can get so you can learn, you can establish your own brand, become valuable, and then make your next move.
Well, but so many kids come out of college and don't have that background to do it, but the ones that I can help, I say if it's a switchboard operator, take it because you're in the door. But then you launched your career with MDB, but then you added things to that agency that were new, and one of the most important thing you added to that was Cary Hatch.
Well, you're kind, but
it's
I mean,
true.
honestly, we started out as a design firm doing a lot of corporate identity work and what have you. And then when I bought the firm in '87, at the ripe age of 30, because at 30 you think you know everything, and then you get into the driver's seat and you say to yourself, "What the hell is payroll tax?" So and when you look at your own P&L for the first time, you thought, "Oh boy, what's that liability? What does that mean?" As an art director, I wasn't trained to really face that, but
the creative person, right?
Yeah, think about it. As an art director, sometimes I say that I basically have an advertising agency, a business to support my habit because I'm helplessly in love with advertising and helping people through advertising and promoting their brand, but running the business really to support my habit. So. You learn a lot along the way, I would say.
And then you also turned 31 and you realize you didn't know a lot at 30 and you don't know a lot at 31, but you had a good year.
Well, and
you stayed alive.
And I had a father and a mother who believed in me because you can imagine taking that turn and going from an employee to an employer. I had to borrow, at that time, it was $10,000 from my parents to buy the company. That sounds crazy now when you think of it.
You got a bargain.
I got a bargain, and then I paid something incremental to purchase the name, but because I thought, I had 6 years of equity in that name, and I thought, well, who the heck wants to have another woman-owned company? And I thought, well, okay, I'll stick with this.
Well, it's a great thing for our town that you did this and stayed in our town and made such a huge impression. And then, I don't know who your guru was, but we all have them. Whoever got you started in this public service world deserves a lot of credit for helping you succeed. That is Cary Hatch to me. You're everywhere.
Well, we try to support causes that matter, and things that can make a difference, a tangible, measurable difference in not just individual lives, but in the collective lives of the region and what we represent as a region. So we've been fortunate. I've worked on a number of boards, Samaritans for the Homeless being one of them that comes to mind. We're currently working with Truth Initiative. I serve on a lot of different boards, International Women's Foundation, Leadership Greater Washington.
Executive
and
committee.
Heroes, for sure. Heroes has made a
absolutely.
huge difference in the community, and
Right.
we've been fortunate to work with their brand.
International Women's Forum. I mean, the list goes on and on. Now, when you're working with these organizations, because I tell people it's one thing to join, but it's another thing to show up. And you show up. And these things must take a lot of your time. But your time is your life.
Well, and it's also my word. It's my bond. And, why would you volunteer to do something if you're not going to contribute? I mean, I think that honestly is a character flaw. I'm not willing to commit our time, my company's time, certainly not my time, for something that's not going to reflect positively. And when you give your word that you're going to do something, you and I are cut from the same cloth on this. You show up, you do what you say you're going to do, and if something good comes out of that, all the better.
Absolutely.
But you can't be looking for the next trick, the next quid pro quo necessarily. It's about contributing and making, a life that's meaningful.
Well, you've lived your life, and it's paid off great because your agency is so successful. Your imprint in the market is fabulous, and my wife calls you the maven of advertising. And the fact that you did it in one time was a man's world. It's not true anymore, but at one time it was.
It's funny you bring that up. People talk about the pink jungle and different things when they think about advertising and marketing and PR. And there are a lot of women in the industry. There's not that many owners. And that have real P&L responsibility, because I take that seriously. I mean, there are families depending upon me. People have children; they're going to college and things like that. So it's a real job.
It is,
and it's not just fun.
You take it home with you at night too.
There's just not that many women, even on a national level. One of the things we did. This is actually our 35th year in business. It's hard to believe. Of course, you would say I started at 12, but I looked at one point in time and I said, how many companies, I went to the 4As, the American Association of Advertising Agencies, I said, how many women-owned companies are there in the United States that have been around as long as we have, where they don't have partners and they absolutely have controlling interest? In other words, there's no holding company involved. The answer was 13. In the country. I know, even I was flabbergasted. Now that may have changed now, but so there aren't that many. There are women that have ownership stakes, but not that many women that have 100% controlling interest.
That's an interesting story. I want to continue with that. We're going to take a break here. This is Our Town with the formidable Cary Hatch.
Hi, Tony Sybil here to tell everybody about our wonderful restaurants at Washington Harbor. Tony and Joe's, the best seafood in the city. Nick's Riverside Grill, wonderful chops and steaks. Wonderful views of the Kennedy Center, Roosevelt Island, Roslyn skyline. Spectacular. 2 bars outside right on the water. Fabulous food. For dinner reservations, call 202-944-4545. It's really a great experience. We'll see you down at Tony and Joe's or Nick's Riverside Grill.
You're listening to Our Town with Andy Ockershausen.
This is Our Town. Andy Ockershausen talking to Cary Hatch, and Cary has triggered me with something I can't believe. Only 13 women own advertising agencies and are responsible for it in the whole United States. That's a shock.
It was shocking to me, 100% ownership. But yeah, I knew it would be a small number. I didn't know it would be that small.
Well, I could think of. I threw out a couple of names of people that I grew up with in Washington. They were women that had their own agencies, and they are gone, of course, now. But also, I think back to the years of growing up in the business and meeting the advertising women and hearing about that woman that had Braniff Airlines that did great advertising with the end of the plane. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And I sat and watched Mad Men, and I was fascinated by it. And the people that work with me at Comcast would say, "Did people smoke in the office?" They were shocked. Did people drink? I said, everything you saw happened in Mad Men.
Yeah, and it's funny because I came on the very tail end of that because I started my career in the late 70s. But the thing that was fascinating, in fact, I was just sharing this story this morning with another colleague, was that I can remember at the time, before I bought the company, going into Ogilvy, and Michael David Brown and I were there at this time to execute an annual report for them. And I can remember as I left, hearing the guy from Ogilvy say something to Michael, says, yeah, and when you come back, bring Sweet Cheeks with you. So that was kind of my taste of Mad Men.
Right.
But the drinking, the long cocktail hours, midday, and then if they didn't extend to 5 o'clock, they started at 5 o'clock. I do remember
absolutely.
that. I do remember that.
And the 3 martini luncheon was a little too much, but there was at least 2 martini luncheon. There was every restaurant in Washington made all their money off their liquor bill, and now they don't do that anymore. But in the advertising world, it was well known. You had to drink. The first time I saw a man drink a vodka martini, I said, why would you drink vodka? He said, you can't tell it on their breath. And I said, well, boy, you got a surprise coming. But everybody drank gin.
Yeah, no, those were some crazy times for
It was
sure.
like Mad Men. There were crazy times in advertising, and the crazy things. The guy that did the thing for Jerry Delafema about the car or something from one of those wonderful people that brought you Pearl Harbor.
Oh, yeah. There were some outrageous campaigns.
Outrageous, was it?
Yeah.
Now
but,
they shoot you, of course, if you say that.
Well, and when you think about the kind of creative that really was biting, that would get through then and not now, it's a total change. And then, obviously, with the internet and so much of our work is digital now, but everything's changed.
Well, the whole world is going very digital now, and I think it's probably changed for the best. But of all the things that you're involved in, is there something that's near and dear to your heart other than the border trade? And we both know, I tell everybody, the best thing ever happened to me many years ago, 50 years ago, was getting involved in the border trade. And I hope that's been true with your experience.
The Board of Trade, Leadership Greater Washington, the DC Ad Club, and now my affinity on a national level for the American Advertising Federation, 4A's American Association of Advertising Agencies. Really, I consider myself a self-appointed spokesperson to advocate for the industry. I'm privileged to serve on the Government Relations National Committee, on the national board, and advocating for agencies and making sure that regulations don't take away from a very robust industry. So I'm passionate about, as you know, so many things.
Oh, my God.
Heroes
Cary.
being one of them, making sure that we have an opportunity to represent and advocate for the first responders that fall in the line of duty. Both fire and our police force as well. And
wonderful organization.
Just wonderful organization.
Well, what was it you were involved in yesterday? Were you at a breakfast with Jim Inigar? Was it for Goodwill?
It was for the Washington Police Foundation, honoring Kathy Lanier. And that's another great success story. When you think about
fabulous.
Someone who started as a beat cop, as a single mom, becomes not just the chief of police here in Washington, but goes on to be the chief security officer for the NFL. I'm waiting for her life to come out in the form of a movie. I'm so proud of her.
She looks so good, too. Every time I see her, and we see her around town, and knew her when she was not the chief, and she's a special person, and she's committed to this city. She's from our town. Even though she was born in Maryland, it's our town.
No, and she's got the heart of a saint and such a great role model, not just for the community at large, but for women. When you think about Washington of having really the home of the most powerful executive women in the country, we have greater capacity and greater recognition for executive women than really any place in the country.
And the high profile that women have in this, we got that woman running for president. That's the first one, and we got so many things going on here, and so many things going with you. Now, how about the thing? What's nearest and dearest to your heart, other than the Board of Trade?
I'm very passionate about branding Greater Washington. We talked a little bit about this. It's an initiative that's being funded by the Council of Governments and the Urban Land Institute and the 2030 Group as a way to be competitive and remain competitive as a region to attract and retain millennials, entrepreneurs, businesses, so that we can continue to sustain the good living that we have here, the standards that frankly I think are second to none. But yeah, I'm a little partial. So there you, New York, and Chicago.
You're a maven. You got a right to be important.
Yeah, but I'm privileged to be the project manager on that initiative, working in tandem with Interbrand out of New York City and
And that's all pro bono, correct?
No, I'm working on a stipend, and this is all being funded through those 3 organizations.
Is that right?
To provide a messaging platform to help us actively market the region and be competitive. One of the things that's amazing and people don't really know is that while we have so many great university systems, and again, second to none, many people come here to become educated, but then they leave. We need to not just attract, but retain that talent in our region to remain competitive. We do have a fair number of people leaving the region, because let's face it, other cities, Kansas City, Charlotte, Atlanta, Chicago, New York, are upping their game, Boston, that are taking that talent pool from us. And this is an initiative, Branding Greater Washington, to make sure that we attract and retain those people.
Well, I recall many years ago, probably 40 years ago, the Board of Trade, we were deeply involved in the fact of branding Washington in a better way. We used a model of the Cleveland Power, and we couldn't say that in Washington because it is power here, but to keep people here was a challenge.
It is. And when you think about, if you think of us as a tri-state region, I mean, because you got Maryland, D.C., and Virginia, and you think about some of the mindsets and the fiefdoms that are about, well, I'm not going to go to Virginia, or I can't cross the bridge to Maryland, and those kinds of things. Working collectively with all of our assets makes us extremely competitive. I mean, things like Forbes saying that we're the coolest city in America. When you think about the number of university systems, the standard of living here, the level of education here, we have so many things. And the Inc. 500 companies that are here. We have so much going for us, but if we start dividing that by region, oh, I'm in Maryland, you're in Virginia. I mean, that is not a formula for success. We need to come together around this.
Cary, it's also always been a challenge to get the suburbs involved in the city. We've lived with it, you live with it, through the Board of Trade. We designed that emblem many years ago to link everything. I don't know if it's still permissible, but we linked everybody together at one time. And what you're doing is so important. And we're going to be back, and we're going to take a break here now, and I'm going to be back and talk to Cary. I got to find out about her. I know about her life as an advertising maven, but now I want to find out about her life as a person. This is Andy Ockershausen, and this is Our Town.
Are you retired or soon will be? Is your will up to date? Don't want to leave a mess for your family to clean up. I'm attorney Mike Collins, the guy who sends you those invitations to my estate planning seminar. I'll teach you how to save taxes, avoid probate, protect your heirs from lawsuits, bankruptcy, even the divorce court. Keep your money and your family with our innovative Reservoir Trust. Watch the mail for your invitation. Tuition's free when you register online at MikeCollins.com. That's MikeCollins.com.
You're listening to Our Town with Andy Ockershausen. Brought to you by Best Bark Communications.
This is Andy Ockershausen again. This is Our Town with Cary Hatch. And Cary, I want to find out more about you and how do you do it as a woman, as a responsible mother, as a responsible wife, and you still get around everywhere because I see you everywhere.
Well, first, Andy, and you'll definitely align yourself with this. My husband's a saint. First of all, because he allows me to go out at night and do what I do. We're a little bit like bookends. I'm more of an extrovert. He's more of an introvert. What a great guy. Works for Department of Justice. Very dedicated to his mission and understands that I'm dedicated to my mission. So that
You work together then?
Yeah. Well, in a sense that he's DOJ and I'm in advertising, but we understand each other's passion.
Is he an attorney?
No. He's an intelligence officer.
Well, that's a lot better than being an attorney, a lawyer. You know the difference between a lawyer and an attorney is $500 an hour.
There you go.
I don't want an attorney. I don't need a lawyer. Get him cheap.
But he's a saint, and
you have a son.
We have one son, as I think I mentioned to you earlier.
Would you have him in between meetings? Of course.
Well, my whole life I've done everything backwards. I bought my agency, then I got married, then I had my son. So, and as my husband Doug says, I know where I fall. And as long as you know your protocol in life and you know exactly where you are on the agenda, there's no problem, right? But he's such a great guy and such a yin to my yang and respects what I do, and I respect what he does. I mean, he's a subject matter expert. He's really the intellect in the couple here, and certainly we're thankful that was passed down to our son, because there was one moment in time after I found out we were pregnant. I said, oh my Lord, what if he gets my math skills and your communication skills? So that could have been a problem because, finance.
He's still in high school?
He's actually graduated from University of Chicago. He's with Capital One. He's in New York now.
Wait a minute. University of Chicago?
Oh, I know. That's what I'm
big
saying.
Time,
well,
man.
He got my husband's math skills and my communication skills.
Wow.
So he came out okay.
Oh.
Survived
and he's
his
happy,
parents.
Of course. Have you had grandchildren yet?
No, he's not
Hatch.
married and no grandchildren. No, not yet. He's got a main squeeze, a girlfriend in New York, and she's doing well too, out on Wall Street. And
Well, I didn't know that part of your family, but I knew about your dad because he was part of our life here in Washington and part of the WMAL and part of Janice's life.
yeah.
Also.
Well, and that's kind of the DNA of, and what great fortune, right, that I've had to
Absolutely.
have the parents that I had and had the backing that I've had, and also a dad who had a career largely based in Washington most of the time, and then bought Wilkins Coffee, which you're familiar with, and Janice is, of course, familiar with. And as he said, he went from high tech to no tech and ran that for several years and then sold that to Royal Cup. But in the interim, that's how I met a lot of his colleagues and friends, including our mutual friend, Charlie Brotman, the best dancer in the world, I just want to say. My favorite dancer with the velvet jacket. And
Twinkle Toes.
Twinkle
Brotman.
Toes, love him. And but then when he had Wilkins Coffee, one of the factoids that came with that was that's an old line Washingtonian brand.
Wonderful name, a great name.
Well, and from the late 1800s, John Wilkins, and then in the 50s, they used, let me get this right, I'm trying to think of the name of the Ehrlich, Alvin Ehrlich's company, to do the advertising for Wilkins Coffee, which started out with Jim Henson and his puppets, not Muppets
I know,
at
they
that
were
time.
puppets, right.
Wilkins
A local
and
guy,
Watkins.
University of Maryland.
University of Maryland. Shot those commercials. I have over 100 of them in my
I've
basement.
seen. You ran them one night at an ad club meeting.
Oh, it's so much
Fabulous.
fun. And that's how Jim Henson got his start.
Did you know, I'm sure you did more than I would know, that they used to sponsor Willard Scott's program on Channel 4? His weather report was sponsored by Wilkins. And it was a sensational show to watch Willard and then watch the Muppets.
Well, you know what's even more interesting? Not only did I know that, I was going through the archives of all the Wilkins stuff that I have, and I'm flipping through there, and there's an invitation for are you ready? The DC Ad Club from the 1930s with Wilkins Coffee, who was sponsoring the orchestra for the DC Ad Club event that evening. So what a flashback.
Was it at a hotel?
It was at a
Probably
hotel.
The Willard or someplace
Yeah, it was
like
the Willard,
that
yeah.
In the 30s. They were sponsoring everything. Well, we know what that is. Janice and I remembered Wilkins so well, and Janice got Wilkins to supply coffee for our wedding reception. Is that correct? Yeah. John? He brought in the table, and we had Wilkins coffee, and it was all part of our life. And, everybody knew about Wilkins. Now, what are you going to do for Cary? What's on your bucket list, Cary Hatch?
World domination, I think, is next. We're still chasing business. Like I said, we're passionate about what we think we can bring to brands, conquering new brands. Actually, one of the things we're focusing on is working with incubators, whether it be in the culinary category or the technology category, working with startups and taking their brand to market, because there's a whole new wave of entrepreneurs that are intrigued by branding but don't have the experience, and we think we can help bring them to market.
Well, but your whole life you've done that. You brought people along. Now, how about you personally? What do you look forward to? You and your husband? Grandchildren, other than that?
Here's the deal. My family has longevity. I'm only about halfway done. Both of my grandmothers lived till over 100. So
you're gonna be around, baby.
So I'm going to be around, and you know what my real strategy is? Just to outlive my competition. So I think I'm going to do okay.
Great.
Yeah,
you put them away.
Okay.
You forced Baumstein out of town. Yeah. Now, the one thing is happening that you should know about. We heard about it yesterday from Dinagar. The Washington Post, through Bezos, is having a special seminar of some kind where he talks about the future. He's out of this world like Elon Musk, according to Dinagar. You ought to attend that.
Absolutely.
I don't know how it's going to be, whether it's an ad club function or what it is, but Janice and I would like to go to listen to this man. He's a visionary, and may help you. It's going to help us.
Well, we'll just invite ourselves.
We can do that.
That's
You
okay.
can do it. With your list of achievements, you can get anywhere. Now, what about your son? What's he look forward to? Not coming back to his home? He's the guy that left his town.
No, I know. And it's interesting because when he first got out of college, he moved to Richmond, and he had some options. He could have come to McLean or Richmond or going to Wilmington, Delaware, and thought his money would go further in Richmond. And after a year of Richmond, which he did enjoy, he said to himself, not big enough for me. So that's when he moved to New York.
But he's still in New York?
He's still in New York, just moved there about a month ago.
He's going to be in New York. Well, you got a good reason to go to New York to visit him. But I don't call the University of Chicago a college. I call that almost the university in America for people with brains.
Yeah, we were so proud of him. Double major in economics and political science. Like I said, it could have gone the other way, Andy. If he'd gotten my math skills, it would have been, who knows?
He didn't have an art director skills anyway.
No, this is true. But he's a great communicator as well.
Well, Cary, this has been just so delightful. I've learned so much about you I didn't know. I would have people that turn in this podcast know that you're more than just that. And I say this with admiration. That girl that shows up at all the meetings. That's what I hear guys in my generation say. Is that girl Cary Hatch coming into the meeting? But you get around, Cary, and it's made your life. We always quote an older woman and wrote in the Cleveland newspaper, "Get up, get dressed, and get out." She's in her late 90s. That's us.
That's us.
Cary, thank you so much. It's been a delightful visit to our town. I'm glad you are a maven in our town.
Delighted to be with you.
Have a wonderful year. And this is Andy Ockershausen, and this is Our Town.
You've been listening to Our Town Season 1 with your host, Andy Ockershausen. New Our Town podcast episodes are released each Tuesday and Thursday. We welcome your comments and suggestions on how you like the show or who you'd like to hear from next. Catch us on Facebook at Our Town DC or visit our website at OurTownDC.com. Our special thanks to WMAL Radio in Washington, D.C. for hosting our podcasts.